Hello. Well, today I'm speaking with Natalie Osbourne Thomason, who you may recall is the author of the book, The Ghost Hunting Casebook, which I featured in one of my earlier videos. Hello, Natalie.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm well. I hope you are.
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Thank you for joining me today, Natalie. And your story, investigating the paranormal, is a really interesting one. It's really intrigued me. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm going to be 60 next year, so um, approaching retirement age from working, but I kind of retired as a well, semi-retired as a paranormal investigator. But I started out in the 90s, writing books and investigating. I joined the Ghost Club, which is based in London. It's very famous because it's Charles Dickens started it, and Prince
Wow.
Charles member as well. I don't think he ever went to any meetings that I went to, but and I started doing investigations in the early 90s. The reason that got me into there's several things that got me into this. One of them was my late father, because he had so many ghost stories that things he'd experienced. And locally in Northamptonshire, where I live, he used to take me to haunted spots, like haunted roadside, where ghosts can be seen, and haunted pubs and all sorts of places. My other sisters were too scared, but I used to want to go from a very young age, of about sort of like 7 or 8. I can remember sitting once on the A45 in a bit of a lay-by because apparently that road, in the Victorian, well, actually pre-Victorian times, when the only way you could get anywhere was by horse, carriage, or foot, or bicycle, I suppose. Yeah, that was another way. Apparently, horses would not travel down that road late at night. They would just refuse to go past a certain bit. So that's where we parked our car. And it's near a church and a graveyard, but I don't think it was anything to do with that. But yeah, me and Dad would sit there and he'd say, hopefully we'll see the ghost. And he found some other sort of places. And we used to go on holidays to Scotland most years, and we'd stay in lots of spooky castles and farmhouses. I think once we even stayed above an undertaker's, which was quite interesting. So yeah, kind of got me into that kind of stuff. But I've had strange personal experiences of spirit since I was 7, because my grandmother passed away when I was that age. And I can remember going up into my bedroom, and all of a sudden I saw this mist coming towards me. It was as if someone had sprayed perfume droplets in the air. There was the shape of her moving, and it came towards me, and I heard a voice saying, "Be a good girl, I'm watching over you, be a good girl."
Mm.
And I was so happy because I was really upset she died. I ran downstairs, I told my parents, and they said, "Stop making up stories, don't be silly." Well, actually, my mum said that. My dad
Yeah.
didn't.
Can't
Um,
imagine your dad thinking that. Yeah.
no, mum was going, "Oh, she's in heaven with Jesus." I said, "Well, she might be in heaven, but she's visited us as well. Yeah, she's come to see me." "Oh, why would she just come to see?" But there's a bit of an argument.
Oh,
So I learnt to keep it quiet because my mum was a bit scared of it. Dad was very open minded about everything. He was quite religious though. He was a Christian, and he but he believed that spirits could come back and interact. Um, but I don't think Mum liked the idea of it being in the house, even if it was her mother, the spirit. So she really didn't like the idea of it. So what happened then? When I was about 14, I was going on a job with mum, and they used to show corporate films for
yeah.
various companies. And when it was the school holidays or late in the evening, I'd come with mum or dad they'd give me some pocket money for helping them carry equipment in and out and stuff. So we were coming back from we were in Bourne, I think it's in Cambridgeshire, Bourne. We'd been there and we were driving back. We got some fish and chips, and mum said, "Let's find somewhere quiet. We'll park up and eat our fish and chips." So we were driving along, and we found this like bit at the side of the road that was really quiet. So we sat there, started eating fish and chips. All of a sudden, these lights came on to the left of us in a field. This hovering disc with loads of spinning lights. It was going up and down very slowly, and it was on the edge of like this woodland. But the lights were really bright, and it was a metallic sphere. And I was so afraid. I knew that we shouldn't be seeing this. We weren't supposed to see it. How I knew that, I don't know. And I said to Mum, drive, let's get out of here. We're not supposed to be here. So and I like my food. So normally I'd want to eat the fish and chips, whatever was going on outside the window,
Yeah,
outside. But I said to Mum, we've got to go. We've got to go. And ever since then, I mean, that's got me interested in UFOs. But ever since
yeah,
then, I've read about people that have had abductions and stuff like that, and they've been taken on board craft. And I think that's what would have happened to us if we'd have stayed there. Something bad
yeah.
would have happened.
So psychically, you were picking up the need to get from there. Was that anywhere near Rendlesham? Is it, or because there's a famous one in the flatlands of the eastern part of England, isn't there?
I
Where
don't know,
there was something came down and the military
the
witnessed it.
forest, yeah.
Yeah, is that Rendlesham?
No, well, I'll have to look into that. I don't think so. But yeah, that's the first.
It's in the
So,
same sort of area, isn't it? Cambridgeshire is in the flatlands.
yeah, the first kind of UFO stroke, whatever you'd like to call it, thing that happened to me. So, and both of us, when we got home, we both drew it on a piece of paper, and she went in one room and we drew exactly the same thing.
Wow.
It was
So just the
so,
two of you and your mother.
yeah, just me and Mum. It was like
Right.
it was probably about nearly 11 o'clock, I would say. That the fish and chip shop was about to shut, and we were
Yeah.
so glad we got. And I can remember us driving for a long time. So by the time we stopped, it was nearly cold because we were both scared. Mum didn't
Yeah.
seem
Oh,
scared
do you mean
at that.
after you saw it? You drove for a long time.
Yeah,
Right.
we
Sorry. I thought you were saying then you drove for a long time and chips went cold before you stopped.
yeah. But basically,
It was the other way round.
we've got to get out of there because if we stay, something bad would happen. How
Yeah.
I knew, I don't know, but I think,
Psychically you perceived it, yeah.
yeah, I think there are and many years later, when I was on a radio show, I used to do a lot for the BBC in Radio Northampton. I regularly had a phone-in show on there, and on one occasion we had a medium, Elsie Oakinson, and she'd seen a UFO and been abducted just down the road from where I used to live. And I met her, and it was so strange because I'd read about her years ago, and she's one of the most famous abductees in the world, actually. But it happened about 3 miles down the road from where I lived. So that
Wow.
was a coincidence. And she said it changed her life. It opened her eyes to things. And yeah, she found that, she was just a school teacher, just minding her own business, driving back from work, saw this flying thing above the car. It kind of followed her back. She pulled into this gateway. The next thing she knew, she was kind of coming to her senses, and a lot of time had passed. I
Right.
think she to remember. But anyway, that's another thing that happened when I was about 13, 14. Yeah, I think I was 14. So that was very strange.
Is
And
that
then,
I was going to say, was that the only UFO you've seen? When I say only, I mean
no, it's not.
there's a lot of people have seen them. I know personally you're another one now. I know at least another 15 others who've seen UFOs.
Yeah,
Um, that was the
got,
only time that you had contact with extraterrestrials, or
well, that I will talk about a podcast that I was involved with later on because
right,
there was at the cinema in Northampton. Sounds a bit bizarre, but yeah, there was a bit of an incident there. So
right. We'll come back to that one then.
yeah.
Podcast.
So basically, there are a couple of things that stand out to me that really got my interest. Then I started reading everything and anything I could on ghosts, the paranormal, cryptozoology, time slips, what else? Just anything that was the paranormal, basically. And then I got married quite young, and I had 3 small children. I lived in a really old mill cottage. So the cottage was given to people that worked at the mill. They rent it really cheaply and live there. And my ex-husband, well, it was my husband at the time, we lived in 3 of these different mill cottages over the 15 years that we were together. And each one of them, they're really old, all of them, they're about 200-300 years old. And in each one of them, we had like poltergeist type things happen, ghosts appearing, all kinds of random things, but so regular you could almost invite people round and things would happen.
Wow.
And we had the TV crew come from Anglia TV. We had German TV come out to film. We had the BBC. We had literally, over the years that I was there, I started writing my books because of all this stuff that was happening.
Yeah.
It was almost on a daily basis. And I thought, surely, I need to write this down, but I also need to interview other people that are going through this.
Who
Like
have the same things, yeah.
And that's what got me started in 1996, writing Walking Through Walls.
So how many books have you written then?
Only 4 so far.
Oh,
But
so far. Yeah.
yeah,
So Walking Through Walls was your first then?
yeah. And then followed by that, it was the ghost hunting casebook, which you reviewed.
Yeah.
Or
Lovely book.
Then I did, what else did I do? Then I did Psychic Quest, which was an autobiography.
Oh,
And then
that sounds interesting.
the Ghost Hunting Files. There was a Ghost Hunting Casebook, Ghost Hunting Files. So yeah, Psychic Quest in some ways is my favourite one because it's just writing about what got me into this, the things that have happened to me. And another thing about this, I kept meeting famous people. And when I met famous people, I'd talk to them and they'd say, yeah, I've seen a ghost or I've had this. I noticed on your video you talked about Kojak, Telly Savalas, is strange. And if you talk to a lot of these famous people, they've had experiences, but they don't often talk about it on the record. They'll say, yeah, I believe in this because this happened to me. So I would say from my research, I would say easily about 50% of people have either seen a ghost or had some kind of real big paranormal experience that they can't explain. So we're talking about half of the world's population, I think. I mean, in some cultures, it's more acceptable to talk about these things. In the West, it's a little bit less understood. People keep it to themselves. But I've interviewed for my books hundreds of people over the years. I've interviewed policemen, school teachers, politicians, a few famous people, and they've all had very tangible experiences that they can't explain. So I think it's not the paranormal. I think it is normal for these things to happen. So
normal, yeah.
I was one of the only female investigators in the world, I think. There didn't seem to be many people investigating ghosts then. The X-Files comes out, and that a huge, I know it's a fictional thing, but some of them were based on real cases. That made it mainstream then. As soon as that came out, you got programs like Most Haunted, and all these other sort of paranormal stroke programs. I mean, Most Haunted was a bit of a joke in my opinion because it was ridiculous. And I did speak to somebody. Actually, I did work with Derek Acora on one show. Wasn't over impressed, to be honest, but there you go. That was just. But yeah, I think they used to make things happen. If they didn't happen, they'd throw something in the background. Say, oh, did you hear that noise? So that was ghost hunting, almost like Scooby-Doo style.
Yeah.
So I didn't really like that program, but generally,
now, too much screaming in it, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was.
Some of them are quite good though, and is it TAPS or something like that?
Oh yes, TAPS.
Transatlantic, they're pretty good. Paranormal Society, I think they call.
Yeah,
they were on a plantation and they showed on their infrared camera, and you could see 2 humanoid figures walking past the camera across the field.
Yeah, well, some of them plumbers, weren't they? TAPS, and that's why they called it that acronym TAPS because, yeah, they're really good. They do it properly, and I did it with a couple of them online.
You've done that kind of thing on the TV, and you've done it off the camera as well, by the sound of it.
I've done, well, basically over the years, I've probably done hundreds of investigations and also interviews with people that from all around the world, but mainly in the UK, obviously. And at one point, I was driving up and down the country. I was going to places like Liverpool, Cornwall. I was going everywhere, and people would contact me. They get hold of me. I don't know how they get hold of me half the time because I didn't have a website or anything. And they'd say, "We need you to help us. We've got a ghost." There was a lady in Liverpool who, her and her daughter were terrified. She said, "You've got to come. You've got to come." And me and my he was a teenage lad at the time. We drove all the way to Liverpool. Didn't ask for any money or anything, only a bit of petrol money, literally, because we and we went there, moved it on, and we were quite successful then. And came back, and the next week it was Cornwall. So it was like I was going all over the place,
Did you
really.
have a job at the time? Were you working?
Um,
Or was that
that
with paranormal work? Was that your
I
job?
yeah, that was my well. Actually, I at the time I had 3 part-time jobs,
Right.
but I saw investigating the most important of all of them, even though it didn't often. I did get paid for a lot of things. I did TV and radio. Often I'd get paid, but for the most part, it was free, or I'd help people out that were desperate that hadn't got money to pay someone to come out. And the first haunted house I went to help someone was a family in Northampton, and they told me all these weird things were happening. They were a bit scared. They were both mediums though, so why they were scared, I don't know. And I sat down to have a cup of tea when I got there, and they said, "Oh, pull the table out." And just as I was about to do it, the table slid out on its own. It was like a nest of tables.
Wow, that's lovely.
I felt helpful spirit, that is.
Yeah. What
And then
what other experiences have you had then? Sorry to interrupt.
I'm just thinking over the years. Well, I worked for a little while. I worked as one of my part-time jobs was in a shop, the co-op in Toaster. Toaster's like a old Roman, well, it goes back to Roman times. It's a really old market town. And the ghosts, they used to throw things at me, coins. When I went for my job interview, I can remember sitting out the back, and the lady Sue said, "Oh, could you fill this form in?" And just as I sat filling it in, I heard a voice behind me, and I'll try and do his voice. It was, "Hello, hello, I killed myself upstairs." I thought, okay. I turned round. I thought someone was playing a prank on me. There was nobody there.
How
So
old were you then?
I'd have been 30 something,
All
30
right.
years.
But it sounds as if, you haven't been frightened since childhood, so
No, I'm not. I'm not
you're
really.
a unique individual,
There have been a few. The only thing that ever scared me was the shadow people.
right? Tell us about them then.
Um, well, basically, years ago, a friend of mine said some of his friends at Stratford upon Avon, they'd got a flat and it was really badly haunted, and suddenly it became haunted, and there were dirty fingerprint marks all over the walls. They'd hear a voice. They'd sense an evil presence in the flat. He said, "Please, can you go and help them?" So I went to Stratford on Avon. I went after work one evening, and I walked in, and I smelt like human excrement. It was vile. It was horrible, and I knew it was something evil in there. There was something really bad. So I went in, looked around, and immediately I knew what was causing it. There was a big mirror, old-fashioned mirror over the fireplace, and in the mirror I could see a man hanging. He was hanging in the reflection. I turned around, there wasn't anyone in there, only the young couple that lived there. And I said, "Your mirror is the problem. Where did you get this from?" He goes, "Oh, I used to work at the Elms pub. They were refurbing it, so they gave me this. I like this old mirror." I said, "This needs to go." I said, "This needs to go now." I said, "There's something trapped in the mirror." But I said, "It doesn't seem very trapped to me. It seems to be, able to." He goes, "Oh God." And he showed me all the dirty fingerprint marks that it was like black soot. And they said, "Take it, take the mirror, take it. Will you take it?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." But I said, and so I went and put the mirror in my car, and literally it took up the whole back. I had to
Well,
put the seat down, and I had to put my driver's seat right forward, and it was pushing in the back of my neck the whole way home. And what I did is I took some sage and I lit a candle, and I sort of cleansed the flat, opened all the windows, commanded whatever it was to leave after I put the mirror in the car. But all the way home, that I was driving home, I could hear the voice saying, "You bitch, you," all these swear words.
well,
"I'll effing get you." And all I could smell was like cigarette smoke and BO and like really unpleasant smells. And this entity was saying, "I'm going to get you, you bitch, you'll be scared of me." I thought, "Oh, great, this is lovely." So I left it in the car, went home, went to bed forgot about it. And then my daughter said to me, "Oh, you need to take me to work." That was the following day. I said, "Oh, I've got to get something out the back of my car. Don't worry, Becky, I'll take you." So I went and got the mirror out. It was really heavy, really ornate, quite nice to look at, but obviously wasn't nice. And I tucked it away. And my daughter said, "What's that, Mum?" I said, "Oh, it's just, someone gave it. They didn't want it." I didn't tell her it was haunted because I've had haunted dolls. I've had all sorts of haunted. Anyway, I took her to work. And she said, "Mum, I don't like that mirror. I've got a bad feeling about it." I said, "Oh, I'm going to stick it on eBay. Don't worry, I'll stick it on eBay." Anyway, she went to work. I think at that time she was working at McDonald's, but also in the children's home for disturbed, like teenagers that would play up. So they got taken into care, and that was somewhere that she quite liked working at the time. And that's part of this story as well. This is the strange part. So she comes back from work and she says, "Mum, I've got a really bad feeling about the mirror. Can you please put it somewhere not in the house? I don't want it in the house." And I said, "I've listed it on eBay. I've put haunted mirror, buyer beware. I don't want it back if you," and I put it on for like £20 or something, but you'd have to come and collect it. And I put a big warning thing. This mirror is haunted. If you buy, you've got to keep it and all of that. So it was in the house probably for 3 weeks before it sold. And when it sold, I thought, great, we're rid of it. Because there was an oppressive atmosphere in the house the whole time it was there. And I said to these people, and they said they came and collected it. I think they came from Leicestershire. I think. It's hard to remember. It's a long time ago. Anyway, within a few days, they wanted me to come and get it. They said it's terrible, all these things. I said, "No, I don't want it back." I said, "My daughter's scared. I don't want it back." And they said, "We're going to smash it. We'll smash it." I said, "Don't smash it," because I said, "You'll really release anything that's in there then." And then they were scared. I said, "Put it on eBay, sell it again. Let somebody else have a go with it." But the mirror incident, we started having visitations from shadow entities. And I didn't even know anything. I don't know how I could have missed finding out about shadow people, because it's a huge phenomena, particularly in America. It's written about a lot. Heidi Hollis is one of the writers that writes about them. But it's the only time in my life I've ever been scared of anything, because they would be in my bedroom at night. I'd wake up and there'd be a shadow hovering sort of in the corner of the ceiling, on the ceiling. A male looked like a man. Shadow. It's just a black shadow. You'd no eyes, no face, nothing, just a shadow. And the fear that I would get, like my blood would run cold. And that was strange to me, because I've been in really haunted houses. I've had things thrown at me. I've seen ghosts walk across the room. I've had them touch me. I've had all sorts of things, and that didn't bother me at all. But these shadow people really got to me. In fact, so much so that I can remember having to sleep with the light on like a little kid, that's frightened of the dark. Because when
And that was appearing when the mirror was in the house. Is that right?
No, it was after the mirror left the house.
After the
Mirror left,
All right.
and I thought that's the end of the problem. And the chap that I did sort of try to communicate with the man that was in the mirror, the man that hung himself.
Yeah.
He was a very sort of depressed person, and he didn't want to move towards the light. He was just very very sort of dark, sort of like depressive sort of spirit. So he did seem to go, but once the mirror had left, it's almost like it opened a portal to these shadow people coming in.
Oh,
For about a year and a half,
a
I
year
was
and a half. Oh.
in the house at night to sleep in my bedroom without the lights on, which is ridiculous. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
it seemed ridiculous.
Well, how did they go after a year and a half?
Well, when I suddenly decided I'm not going to be bullied in my own house, I'm not going to have you, whatever you things are, scare me. And I started reading up about them, and I found out about them. And the more knowledge is power, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I said one night that the shadow was in the corner of the room, and I said, "You can stay there if you like, but you don't scare me." And I turned the light out. And after that, I was never. I have seen the shadow people, and actually, my niece has seen them in her house sometimes, and she's scared. But yeah, I wouldn't be scared now of them. It's lost its power, whatever that power was to scare me.
What do you think they were then?
Shadow people, I think they're entities. They're not people that have, they're not, when you say shadow people, they're not the ghosts of departed souls. They are, I believe, some kind of demonic entities or dark forces that interact with us. They don't move at the same speed. They've never lived. They've never had a soul. They've never, and they feed on our fear. You know, in the kids' film Monsters Inc., how the monsters feed on people's fear. It's a bit of it's a funny program, isn't it?
I've never really seen it, but I can guess what you're talking about.
Basically the
Oh,
monsters in they scare little children and people, and that feeds them. That fear feeds them. Well, the shadow entities, they scare us, and that they love it. They feed on that. So if you're not scared of them, they've lost their power. But I don't believe they're people. They've never lived on earth. They haven't got a soul. They're coming from somewhere else, and they're coming in, but there's more of them at the moment. There seems to be almost like an epidemic of shadow people.
oh.
So yeah, they're not your normal garden variety ghosts. And
You
of the
could
garden
say that,
ghosts, there's lots of different types of them as well.
yeah, you could say there's a lot of fear on this planet right now, feeding that. So,
Exactly. That's
you've been mediumistic, haven't you, from what you said earlier? So
it's,
presumably you've been involved with your own guides and doorkeepers. Did you not ask their opinion on what these shadow people were, and could they get rid of them?
but they told me not to be afraid, and they
Yeah.
said they're not they haven't got a soul,
Oh,
and they're coming here and they're testing you out. That's what they were saying. They're testing you out,
sounds
and
like an interdimensional thing then of some
yeah,
kind, doesn't it?
they 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 found it quite funny. They were enjoying themselves with me because I was somebody that had been on TV. I've been in the newspaper, so nothing ever scares me. I'm not worried about anything. I'll go anywhere, do anything. I used to take on cases that other people didn't want to know. Do you know what I mean? So these shadow people, and I felt foolish to be frightened of shadows in the dark and having to sleep with the light on, which meant you don't get a lot of sleep if you've got the light on all night because your human body has got a
Not the interdimensional.
rhythm. So the darkness sets you into a sleep cycle.
Yeah, but I can remember developing clairvoyance and seeing spirit people as like a black and white negative, the opposite of a photograph.
Yeah, that's
It's
not
not the same thing. It's not what you're talking about.
no shadow people. They're just a dark mass. There's
Oh,
no pose. There's no face. They're not human. That's what scared me, I think, because ghosts. I've even come across in my investigations demonic entities. Not when I say normal demonic entities, I've come across demons and stuff like that, and they don't scare me. They don't scare me at all. In fact, I had one chap come to me. He was a lorry driver, and he said he was possessed. And could I pray for him? Because I do healing as well.
right.
So I said, "Fine, I will." Yeah, his name was Alan, and he lived in Kettering. And he used to come to my house, and I'd do healing on him. He'd feel better for a while. And he said that the evil had left him, and then he'd come back, and he'd have to go to the house. Um, yeah, and his house was really haunted. We did an investigation there, and that didn't scare me. Even when these voices were coming out of him that weren't human, didn't sound human, that didn't scare me. But these shadow people, they're not people. When you say people, they're kind of like. And another thing as well, my daughter started seeing them at work. She started seeing
Oh,
them time outside looking in
why would they follow her?
because she was absolutely terrified, absolutely worse than me. In fact, in the end, she had to have time off work, but it wasn't good because at home they were there, they were at her work, wherever she went, they were there. But she got so ill because she wasn't sleeping that she had to have about 6 weeks off and be on antidepressants. That's how bad it was. And I felt really bad because I thought I've triggered this somehow by bringing that mirror back. That mirror was almost like the portal or the gateway to everything. I think it could have been a coincidence, the timing. But what ushered those things in? But there's been loads of footage actually on live TV and stuff like that. These shadow people. There's a famous one, and it was a football match. I can't remember which teams it was, but during the live commentary in the football match, there's this shadow entity that runs across in the background, across the stores where the people are sitting, runs through the people. These shadow entities as well can move very, very fast. They can move almost at lightning speed. So 1 minute it's there, the next minute it's on the other side of the room. But there's been loads of them captured on live TV broadcasts and stuff. And I think this phenomenon dates back centuries, but it seems very prevalent at the moment. And what you said could be true, because there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of bad things happening at the moment. And that draws them, because they feed on our fears, like COVID. I think that was a time when there was a lot of activity for them, because you think of all the fear that was going around then.
Yeah.
People, weren't they? We didn't know what was going on. It was unprecedented for us. I mean, the last pandemic had been the Spanish flu in 1918. That was the last real global, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think you might have a point there. And I think Derek Okora, you mentioned earlier, I think he might have died of COVID, because he died in January of 2020. We had COVID, Margaret and myself, in December 2019. And that was before, as was Derek Okora's death, before the Chinese announced the thing of COVID. But we had COVID again then in December 2020, the year later, the other 12 months. It was exactly the same thing as we had in 2019. And that was tested as COVID. So we know that was COVID. And when you look at Derek Okora's end on this physical plane, he was in hospital, a very quick, undiagnosed respiratory illness.
He was
into hospital and then dead on the other side. And that's exactly modus operandi for COVID, isn't it?
Or get in contact with him on the other side, they need to ask that question of him, don't they?
Well, if you do speak with it, let us know. I mean, I'm sure you'll find that it was COVID, because I can remember his widow describing how he crossed over, So you mentioned about the different kinds of ghosts and poltergeists that you've encountered. What kind of different forms of this phenomena then have you experienced?
Right, the most common ghost is the recording, which involves sometimes what's called an anniversary ghost as well. So, for example, somebody gets run over on a country lane, and at the time of the incident, that recording will replay. So people driving along, walking along, whatever, will see that incident or that person. And I've come across quite a few of these recording type ghosts. In fact, on a few occasions, I've even put my hand to touch it and it goes straight through. There's just like a piece of film or whatever. That's the most common type.
Where do you think they recorded to then?
Right. Normally, I think it's to do with, I think, bricks and stones and roadways and everything. It's to do with the minerals in the, I mean, when you think about a videotape, it's electromagnetic stuff that's put onto a film, isn't it? Or so I think basically roads which are made of stones and gravel or whatever and bricks, I think they can absorb certain energy and play it back like a tape. So I think it's minerals in the stone or the brick, or minerals in the, I think that could be it. Because in one of my books, I think in the future they'll be able to find out how these things are recorded and replay them. So, for example, they'll be able to get a wall in York, a wall. There's a famous one in York.
Yeah.
In a building that chap saw Roman soldiers coming through the wall.
Yeah, that's famous, that one.
Yeah, and I've actually been.
You've been there. Have you been into that cellar?
Yeah. So basically, I think what scientists will be able to do in the future they'll be able to have equipment that they can attach to, say, a wall, vibrate it, or send an electrical charge, and they'll be able to release also. So it will be acoustic and visual archaeology. So they'll be able to get the sounds from the history and the visuals from the history. I think that's what could happen in the next 2 to 5 years. I think that's going to happen. So they'll get a Roman clay pot, for example, and they'll attach electrodes to it, put some kind of charge through it, and then you might hear the potter talking as he's making the pot. Or you'll go into an old church and you'll attach the electrodes to the wall, or the device to the wall, make this sort of vibration, and then you'll be able to hear hymns and songs coming out. That is, I mean, the telephone, when you think about it, most inventions can be used to prove the paranormal. Things like, for example, Graham Alexander Bell invented the telephone because he wanted to speak to spirits. It didn't work as that, but it worked as something else.
Yeah.
So a clever scientist, someone like Hutchinson in Canada, could probably invent this device, and then we'd be able to see history replaying properly. You'd be able to go to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, where I've been to. It's amazing that, you know, you can put little prayers in the gaps in the stone. They'll be able to attach something to that, and they'll be able to see ancient Israel. They'll be able to see all these different things that happened in these places. I think
they're doing work with it's the soul phone fed, but what they are trying to do is using like the Ouija board, yes, no, move your planchet. They're trying to tilt so that spirit people can communicate in the same way as moving across an alphabet. And they've done some tremendous experiments. They got a computer in one room, they lock up the other room, and in the other room they've got one of these bell things where you put your hands near, and the electricity moves between your hands, and well, that's in the other room, the blacked out room. Then they're working with the medium, and they ask the medium to send their guide into the other room. And when the medium says, yeah, the guide is there now, he's ready, put his hands by the bell, then they'll record it, and lo and behold, it comes on. They've got cameras in the other room, and they'll see it.
Oh, that's reminding me of something.
Yeah. Go on.
This is a bit straight. Right. When I was writing my first book, I lived in the village of Budbrook, and the village of Pattershaw, which was a few miles away, which I would eventually live there. I put an advert in the Fortean Times magazine. If anybody had got any strange ghost encounters or anyone needed help or whatever, to contact me. And I put my phone number in there. I did get some weird phone calls and some weird letters and stuff. But I had a guy contact me that lived in Pattershaw, and he was a retired science teacher. And what he'd done is he had set up some experiments to do EVPs in his shed, because he was really interested in that kind of thing. And he started getting EVPs through, but the EVPs were telling him about people in the village, like told him that the farmer was having an affair. It told him horrible. It was normally gossip type stuff.
Gossiping, yeah.
Tell him. And who was going to die, who's going to pass away, and all that kind of thing. At first, it was a bit of fun because he was finding out things about villagers, and he'd investigate and find out, yeah, it probably was true. So the EVPs, it was like a Snoopy sort of spirit or spirits, there were different ones. And then it started telling him things about himself. And it scared him so much he had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And his wife found out what he was doing in the shed, and she burnt all his tapes. He'd taped it all. And he said, I'm never, ever going to mess with stuff like that again. It was evil what came through, and it was taunting me. But I thought that was a really fascinating. And because I ended up living just down the road from him, literally a couple of 100 meters from his bungalow. That's where I ended up living a few years later. But I can remember him telling me how scared he was and how real it was. And I said, have you got any of these tapes left? And I hear, no. He said, no. I had to get rid of all of them. It was nasty what was happening. He said he was just interested in dark things and bad things, and it was telling him things about him, things that were going to happen to him that hadn't happened yet. And when they did happen, he was absolutely terrified. I can remember interviewing him and thinking, oh my God, this paranormal world is just mind blowing. I'll never ever stop being amazed, ever.
Yeah.
And his wife said, oh, I don't like him talking about this. You'll bring it all back. He'll be ill again. I said, no, I won't ever come back again. I'll write this in my book. And I said, when the book comes out, I'll let you know when it's coming out and you can read it yourselves. But I'll also tell you what I'm going to write as well so you can approve it. Because I don't believe in putting stuff about people and they don't like it and it's not. I think it's really important to work with people and be respectful of, because it takes a bravery. And a lot of people would say, don't use my real name or just use my first name, or I don't want to be identified because of my job or whatever. So you've got to respect that, haven't you?
That's right. So, what book would that be in then, that particular story?
I think that is in the Walking Through Walls, I think.
Right.
And also there was another one. What was that other one? Oh yeah, another time I worked with a magazine called Bizarre Magazine. It was like a bit of a strange magazine. It wasn't necessarily to do with the paranormal. It had weird stories in there. And I went with a film crew, and we went to the World's End pub in Northampton, at Ecton. And the reason it's called the World's End is during the English Civil War, they kept bodies of the dead in the cellar, and there were tens of bodies in that cellar. And that pub has been haunted ever since, unsurprisingly. And when I was going there, the day of the investigation, I took my kids there with me just to meet up with the landlady, who was an old school friend. And I told her when we were going to turn up and what she had to do and everything. And if she wanted to be part of it, she could, the investigation, the filming and all of that. And my daughter went down into a playroom, which is next to the cellar, with my son. And something scared them down there. I don't know what it was. They wouldn't tell me. And they said, Mummy, we never want to go there again, because they're quite young kids at the time. And I said, well, I told you not to wander off. And they said, oh, well, we were just playing in the playroom. But the playroom was a bit of the cellar that was next to the original cellar. And I didn't even realise where they'd gone. They'd just scattered. I thought they'd gone outside to play on the play equipment. So basically, when we did the investigation, there was a lad that wanted to join us. He was a barman. He'd not worked there very long. And he said, please, can I do it? Please, can I do it? I said, okay, but just, make sure that you do everything you're told and sort of behave yourself. Because he wasn't very old. He was, I'd say, sort of 20s or something. Anyway, we did the investigation and we got quite a few different things happen. Anyway, later on, the next day, Belinda, who was the landlady, contacted me and said that the barman won't come back in again ever. He said he's never, ever going to come back to this pub ever again. He saw something and heard something, and it's absolutely terrified him. And I said to her, give me his phone number and I'll talk to him. She said, no, he doesn't want anything to do with any of us. He doesn't want anything to do. So I don't know what happened to him. I've no idea what happened to him.
Yeah.
Bit of a weird one, but the cellar was very eerie, and apparently they piled the bodies up in there before burial, so that's why it's haunted, I think. So that
maybe. So what other kind of ghosts have you identified then? You think a great many of them are the anniversary type replays?
Anniversary or the recording, which are the most common.
Whichever word you want to call it.
So you've got, say, like my grandmother that came back into the
that's a spirit person,
yeah, and they may come in as a voice, as a smell, like someone's perfume or cigar smoke or whatever, cigarette smoke. Then you've got the poltergeist, which is fairly rare, but can happen to any family or anyone, and that's usually short-lived. So it will happen for a few months. Like the Enfield case is the most famous worldwide. And that was on and off for quite some time.
Yeah. One guy who's written extensively about poltergeists is Guy Lyon Playfair. Did you ever meet him?
I haven't met him, but I've met Morris Grace.
Met Morris, did you? All right, yeah.
That's on one occasion, I was reading his book on the Enfield case, and I was at the airport in Spain, and he happened to walk up to me and say, "Oh, you've got good."
What a
You've got...
lovely coincidence. No such thing as coincidences.
No,
So that's how you met Morris Grossman.
well,
Gross,
no,
is it? Oh,
before I'd met him before a few times on TV
right.
and stuff, but
Oh, right, yeah.
I said that looks like Morris Gross. And I was sat on the floor for some reason. I don't think there was any seats. And he came up to me. He was quite a short man, but he was very,
Yeah,
very, very sort of eccentric but nice. And he goes,
yeah.
"Oh, you've got good taste." I said, "Oh," I said, this isn't the first time I've read this." I said, I couldn't think what to bring on holiday, so why not?" And he said, "Oh, that's great." I don't, yeah, that was so weird that I met him there, but that was just a
Lovely coincidence, yeah.
nice.
So you mentioned about your gran being a ghost. Wouldn't you call that as a spirit, mediumistic sort of interaction rather than
Yeah,
a ghostly interaction?
no, I think it was her. No, I don't think it. And the thing is, as well, she was a psychic medium. She used to have people come to her house, and she would read their cards. She'd use the playing cards.
Yeah,
I didn't know that she'd been a psychic medium until I started doing it. And my mum
right,
said, "Oh, following in your grandmother's footsteps."
right.
I said to Mum, "Oh, what do you mean?" She said, "Oh, your gran used to have people around the house, and she'd tell them that." And in one week, apparently, she had 3 people, and she saw their deaths, but she couldn't tell them.
Mm,
And she stopped doing it after that. And
mm.
she said, "Don't you ever do this." She said, "Don't. It's too painful. It's too difficult." So when I started doing it, my mum didn't like it because her mother had warned her, um, against it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
What do you, we'll go into that in a moment, and I'll come back on that as time. So when you saw your grandmother, you could have seen your grandmother mediumistically, couldn't you? So I personally wouldn't call that a ghost. I would say that was just interaction with a spirit. But if you go into a pub and you walk into a cavalier or a roundhead who's been in that pub location maybe 400 years off and on, and often seen by a variety of people through the ages, that's the archetypal ghost that most people can understand. What's the difference between that kind of ghost and a spirit person?
well, normally, in my experience, when I've been somewhere and seen a ghost, like say a cavalier or whatever, or someone that's linked with the past of that, I've seen quite a few victims of suicide. That to me, I know exactly what you're saying, but normally you don't interact with one of those type of ghosts that's inhabiting a place that's linked with its past. You're not going to necessarily have a conversation. Whereas if it's your mediumship, you're going to probably be able to interact with it and say, "Oh, why are you here? What are you doing?" and all of that. So in some ways, I'd never thought about that with my grandmother because she interacted with me. She told me to be a good girl and she's going to watch over me and all of that. But it was because it came like a mist, I suppose. It was like it was as if, if you spray perfume in the air, you can see the droplets. It was just like moving droplets. And the interesting thing was when she passed away, she was very thin. She was about 4 stone. She literally stopped eating,
Mm,
but the spirit form was plump. She was her old normal granny shape sort of thing, which
yeah,
pleased. I thought, "Oh, she's a normal self," because it really traumatized me seeing her laying in the hospital bed, really emaciated. That was horrible.
yeah,
So to see her form, normal, her
looking
normal,
healthy. Yeah,
that was to me, that was helpful. And I wasn't after that, I was not sad that she died. Everyone else was still sad, but
yeah.
we weren't. So that was a gift for
So
me.
give you great comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I know that a lot of people who maybe not necessarily mediums who see ghosts and interact with them in
yeah,
especially pubs. Because I used to have a traveling job that took me to a variety of pubs and clubs and that kind of place. And I'm only mentioning that because that's most of the places where people told me what they'd witnessed. And one
yeah,
man went down in his cellar and the lights played about. And as the ghostly form that he could see was showing itself, the light bulb in the that he switched on wasn't coming on, but as the light bulb became more powerful, then the ghostly apparition that he saw disappeared. But that apparition was interacting with him because it pointed at him
Yeah,
and wagged his finger and shook its head
yeah,
and the like. So it did interact.
yeah. That's rare though, because for the most part, say if pubs are good places to do investigations because first of all they're usually really old buildings. Second of all, what people don't realise because they're a public building, they're often used for as like mortuaries, the back rooms where people would lay out the dead, and sometimes it'd also be used as like a coroner's court years ago. So they'd have like a court sort of setting for crimes. So
Yeah,
you've got also you've had people that have died in the pub, you've had fights in the pub.
yeah,
There's the public building for that area. People would live. I mean, pubs are the sad thing to me. The village that I left last year that I'd lived in for 25 years, the pub completely closed, and the building was deteriorating. It was a really old pub, the Red Lion, and it was
mhm,
crumbling, and it's so sad.
yeah,
Beautiful old buildings, and that because of it started with the smoking ban, and then obviously people cost of living crisis now, people tend to drink a little bit more at home, don't they? So
yeah. I
people
think
don't
so. Yeah,
used to. I mean, men would live at the pub. Their wife would like sort of like say to them, "You're right, you've got to be back for such and such for your dinner." But
yeah,
they'd be at the pub after work. That was a normal thing,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
That was their home for a lot of men.
Yeah.
And
But
some
no
women
comment.
were generally that was
I
like,
like my Guinness. Well, I used to like my Guinness till it got the better of me.
oh
Um,
no, oh no,
have you ever been to the Skirrid Inn in near Abergavenny? It's in Wales.
have yeah.
What did you make of the Skirrid Inn then? Because as you were saying earlier, they even hung the people after they convicted them.
Right, I'll tell you what
Skirrid.
I picked up that there was a lot, but somewhere on the premises or outside or somewhere in that area, there was a lot of when I call treasure, a lot of gold, silver, jewels that someone's hidden. That this somewhere in that building or outside or something is. I could sense that there was a huge amount of money there, but it hasn't been accessed. And I think it's in some kind of box, and it would be worth a lot of money. Yeah, that's what I was picking up there. But yeah, wasn't a very nice particular atmosphere in there.
We had a lovely meal there.
Oh, did you? Yeah,
Yeah, lots of times. I mean, we go to the Camera Club. We go to San Anthony Priory, full of ghosts. That one is apparently. And
if I was the pub landlady, I'd be looking behind her.
well, I think they make a lot of money out of the ghost experience, don't they? The Skirrid.
I can imagine,
Um,
yeah.
we were
But
talking about time earlier, and now could time slip be the answer to some of these ghostly encounters?
yes, because
What do you think a time slip is then?
right, to be honest, I think there's how we perceive time is not really how time is. So past, present, future. Some physicists believe that it's kind of all happening at once. So you could technically have access to any time in the past or any time in the future. So the concept of time we haven't got it on the quantum level. And there are particles called tachyons. Physicists have discovered that go back in time. So they're time traveling particles.
Oh,
And about 20 years ago, would it have been 20 years ago? Oh, what I can't exactly remember when there was a man who'd invented a time machine somewhere in the UK in his shed, and it was on the news. It was on the Anglia news, and I thought, wow, I'd love to have a go with that. He was a science teacher, and I went to a Ghost Club meeting, and by lo and behold, the following week he was there with his time machine, and he
oh,
was in this around this table in this meeting room. I said, would anyone like a go on my time machine? Nobody dared do it, and I said, I do. I'll have a go because I'd said to at the time this must have been longer ago than that because it was when I was still married, so it must have been over 25 years ago. And I said, I'll have the first go on it because like I said, nothing scares me. I'll do, I'll try anything. So we sat all around this table and I put my hands on the machine. It was a bit like a overhead projector machine. It was a block of box and you put your hands on it and he turned it on. I thought this isn't going to work, but it's good fun anyway, having a go. So I sat there and we were in the room in the middle of London near Marble Arch, this meeting place was, and he turned it on and I closed my eyes and I pictured myself going back as far in time as I could. I didn't want to go back to Victorian times. I didn't want to go back to Georgian times. I didn't want to go back to I wanted to go back before modern history, basically. And this sounds absolutely bizarre and weird, but I just said it because he said, "Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see." And I was in like a forest, and that I could smell like the green, like the trees, like the greenery, and there was like animal sounds. But I was sitting on the lap. I know this sounds absolutely bizarre, but it's 100%. I was sitting on the lap of this creature, and it was the best thing I could call it was a bit like a Bigfoot type, Sasquatch type thing. And I was sat on it instead of my chair. I was sat on this creature, but I could feel that it meant me no harm. But I was invading its space, and it was in this forest, and England was completely forested, wasn't it? It was
Yeah,
more,
totally. Yeah.
but there was this creature, and it wasn't an ape. It was more like, oh, I don't know what it was, but I said all I can feel is peace in this place, and the energy is amazing. And when I came back, everybody was laughing, but they were all kind of like short. And then they all wanted to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
What was this?
There's an article in this month's Psychic News about Britain's Bigfoot, and I've seen other things recently up in Scotland where they sightings of Bigfoot type creatures.
Yeah, because I
But
think
the one in Psychic
pre-human.
News has got a footprint and it's down Devon way.
I think this was an early human, like an
Yeah,
early, but possibly not
yeah,
Neanderthal, even maybe even before that. I don't know what it was, but it meant me no harm, and it was very perplexed by me invading its space. But it was completely innocent of malice or anything. It wasn't going to hurt me. It wasn't going to, and that kind of really blew my mind because I wasn't expecting it to work first of all, and then
no,
another. And she went to Argentina and she went back in time to when she saw a UFO. She wanted to go back to then because you could ask it almost where you wanted to go. And she saw the UFO again. She was describing it. She was saying, it's a spinning disc with lights. And I thought, oh no, she's sitting the same one as me. So that was my experience with the time machine.
what's
But
happened to that machine now?
I've no idea. I need to look into that again
Yeah,
because
it would be worth it, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't mind. It's probably passed away now because he was, I would say he was well retirement age then. We're talking over 25 years ago.
Right.
So
Yeah.
he probably has passed away, but his machine, apparently Donald Trump's uncle invented a time machine, John Titor, apparently.
Oh,
Because some people say that Baron Trump, because there's a book that was written in Victorian times and it mentions a Baron Trump time traveler.
oh,
And Donald Trump's son, I can't stand Donald Trump, by the way, but Donald Trump's son's called Baron Trump, isn't he? What I think happens with time is I think sometimes it's folded, almost like a piece of cloth that's folded. So you can be in a different time thing and then walk in and out of it. And there's a famous street in Liverpool called Bold Street, and a lot of people have suffered time slips there, and they've gone into a shop and it's been really old fashioned. They've walked out and they've gone back into the modern world. There's been quite a few
oh,
incidents. So maybe there's spots on the planet where these time anomalies can happen easily.
yeah.
There's a village in Northamptonshire called Hanging Houghton, and people have been driving through there, and they've all of a sudden the atmosphere's changed, and they've seen like people with flaming torches and walking along in old-fashioned clothes. So it's like they've gone back in time.
Yeah.
So
So that wouldn't be a ghostly thing then. That would be a time slip.
possible.
It is possible. I mean, mind boggles, but so many people report different things. In last month's Psychic News, They talked about time slip, where somebody moved into a property and on his old computer, which was in the early days of computers, this is going back to the 1980s, or I suppose, early days anyway, he started communicating with somebody from a long time back who lived in that property.
Yeah.
And the person he was communicating with, who convinced him that he was of the
You,
era of Shakespeare, so you're talking 400 years, convinced him that that person was also talking with somebody from 2099, or sometime a long time in the future.
oh wow.
Yeah. So they asked him the question, "Are you 2199 or something like that?" So he typed in 2199. Are you there? And then he started having messages on the computer. Who knows?
What I've noticed is um, spirit can use technology to interact, you know, like computers, phones. I did have a book years ago, and I lent it to a friend of mine who was a clergyman. Basically, it was called Phone Calls from the Dead. That was the title of the book, and it
Yeah.
was all these people that had a shocking phone call from like their deceased aunt or granny, or one girl, every time she was at her boyfriend's, the phone would ring and it would be her grandmother asking when she was coming back. Well, her grandmother had passed away, and she
Yeah.
had it many, many times.
Oh.
So, and that is really amazing, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
that's what the,
I've heard it. Something about along those lines from people. Somebody
yeah.
said they had it. It is. It's all amazing. Yeah, it really is.
And don't you think that all aspects of the paranormal are all interlinked? Like, for example, ghosts, UFOs, time slips. You can find links to all of them. So if you investigate one, for
Yeah,
example,
you move on into something else. Yeah. When you read a Joe McMoneagle book, have you read any of his books?
no,
One of
no,
America's psychic spies, and his time. There's no such thing as linear time in his
no,
work, and a lot of his experiences are very, very, very psychic. And he says he's not a medium. His sister, they were twins. She's the medium. She talks to so-called dead people, but
yeah.
he never did. But he's a master of so many different psychic phenomena. You know, remote viewing especially, and
Yeah,
more than that. And his books on time are very interesting.
yeah, I've done a bit of remote viewing at times, like 'cause I've tried
How did
to.
that work then?
Sometimes it can work really well. I've been doing because I'm a psychic medium, and people ring me for readings from all around the world. And on one occasion, a guy rang me because his girlfriend was in a nightclub, and he was convinced that she was dancing with another man, and she was doing this, she was doing that. And he told me where the name of the nightclub. He said, "Can you go and see if you could see what she's up to?" And I thought, oh no, I don't really want to do this because I don't want to get into trouble if she is. So he said, please, please. So I said, all right then. And I saw a woman with red hair in the nightclub dancing with a man. And I said, oh yeah, she is in the nightclub, but she's not dancing with anybody. And then he was on the phone. I could hear all this noise, and he actually was in the nightclub then, and he saw her. He was a bit cross with me. But to be
Um,
honest, you can't do it to order always. Sometimes you can go somewhere in your mind and see it, but for the most part, you can't.
yeah, and
It's
Joe McMoneagle said that they would get 25 envelopes, but only five would be about the target that the spy masters wanted them to look at, because if you open it up and play around with the other 20 random targets, whatever they were, then it allows your mind to be totally free. But if you box it in just on the one subject, then it wouldn't work. That's what they found anyway.
sense, yeah. It's a bit like being a medium. You can't be guaranteed to be able to communicate with someone's loved ones. You just can't guarantee it. So any medium that says I can always get in contact, you can't. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
But they
You
like to
it's,
say, don't they? You cannot command or demand. And that's one of their favorite expressions in the spiritualist church.
I'll tell you what my spirit guide said to me once, and I found this really funny. I just started out working as a psychic medium, and one of my guys is called Vera. She's a nurse that died in the 1950s. She worked in a hospital in Brooklyn, and she died in a swimming pool accident. Apparently, that's what she told me. Anyway, she said, I was talking to someone that day, and I was saying how I believed I was really confident in my abilities and all this. And then later on, she said, don't get ahead of yourself. You mediums are just like working telephone boxes. That's all you are. We just use you, or a portal. We just use you. You're nothing special. You're just a telephone. Well, this was
Lovely, lovely.
when telephone boxes were relevant. Nowadays,
Yeah,
probably say you're just like a mobile phone that we're just
yeah,
going to use.
yeah.
I thought, yeah, she's right. I'm just a vessel. I'm nothing. But
But
they
in
get frustrated
sorry,
through it because there's not many vessels that they can utilize to get messages through.
can't be many telephone boxes around in the spirit world, can there?
No, well,
They
there's
can't.
not.
So,
So that
go on.
kind of,
Well, in your long history in spiritualism, then, and with mediumship, have you ever sat in physical circles for development of physical phenomena?
well,